And we are live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the State of Deno. Very excited to do this today and very excited for some of our amazing guests and panelists. I want to make sure that this live stream is working. Okay, good. Looks like it is. So in the chat, feel free to ask questions. If you have questions or anything that you want to get out of this event, feel free to post it here. Would also love to know where everyone is coming from. So feel free to post in chat where you come, where are you, what time is it, what are you excited about, and we'll go from there. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen really quickly. Let's see, Chrome tab and okay, there we go. All right. So wanted to thank my team, This.Labs, for helping set this up. Really love them. For those of you who don't know, we are a web consultancy and we love JavaScript. So we have some pretty amazing clients and we have a lot of fun building stuff. And we're 100% fully remote. So if you want to come join our team, and this is how I make friends, I'm the person who manages the jobs at this.email because that's how I make friends. So yeah, it's a good time. I love it. If you're looking for more resources, framework.dev is a really amazing resource for you all. If you're looking for Angular, React, and Vue, there's different categories where you can find information about these technologies, whether you're learning them for them or you need kind of like more information. You can also compare different libraries in these different technologies. So there's going to be a Node one coming up and maybe sometime a Deno one coming up. I don't know. You guys will have to look at the site and tell me if we can create one. We have a lot of upcoming events as well. So if you're looking for just some extra mentoring in different technologies, we host a bunch of these every month. Angular mentoring is happening October 5th. State of CSS is happening soon as well. Monthly Mentoring Women in Tech is one of my favorite events. If you know women in tech or people who are just getting started or anything like that, all levels are welcome, but it's just a private session for women to hang out anytime. So one of my favorites, State of PWAs is coming up as well. And then we'll have another monthly Mentoring Women in Tech and React Mentoring. Also, if there's a better name for monthly Mentoring Women in Tech, please let me know. I have not figured it out. So it's stayed there for years, but it's a mouthful. I'm your host. My name is Tracy. You can find me on Twitter at LadyLeet. I'm always happy to help out on anything. So feel free to tweet me if you have any questions. And today we have some amazing panelists. So I'll go ahead and let you all do quick 30-second introductions, maybe starting with Luca.
Yeah, I'm Luca. I'm a software engineer working on Deno. I primarily work on our Deno CLI and Deno deploy products and Fresh. And I also do web standards work at TC39. That's the standards committee that standardizes JavaScript, and at WWG and W3C in various working groups working on things like the Fetch API, the Web Crypto API, and WinterCG to make server-side runtimes more compatible with each other.
Nice. Thank you so much. Colin did share WinterCG recently, and I was like, oh my God, this is so exciting. Okay, Bartek next.
Hi, I'm Bartek. I'm an engineer at the Deno company, and I'm mostly working on the CLI, and I try to manage it as best as I can, making sure that releases go out on time.
Nice. Thanks for joining us, Bartek. And David.
Yeah, I'm David Sherritt. I'm also a software developer at Deno. So I work mostly on the CLI and some of our other things like DNT, WASM build, other components of the system. So, yeah.
Thanks for joining us, David. And last but not least, Colin.
So I'm Colin Ehrig. I've been doing server-side JavaScript for a while now. Joined Deno about 5.5 months ago, so I think I'm the newest one on the team from this panel. I've been working a little bit on the Deno CLI as well as node compatibility, which I think we'll talk about a little bit later.
Cool. Awesome. And you're definitely the perfect person to work on node compatibility stuff. So that's really exciting. Well, let's go ahead and get to it. And again, for those of you watching, feel free to ask questions in the chat. I see Nick and Eris saying hi, and Thomas as well. So thanks for saying hi. But yeah, we're super excited to have some fun conversations today. I know there's a bunch of you, well, at least two of you, who specifically said you kind of like spend most of your time working on the Deno CLI. Maybe we can just kind of like explain it to people, like what is it? Why would you want to use it? What are kind of the top features that people should be excited about?
Do you want to take a part, or anyone else?
Sure. So Deno, the CLI is a program that allows you to run your JavaScript code as well as your TypeScript code. And that's one of the highlight features of Deno, in that we ship with TypeScript out of the box. So you can get started with TypeScript in literally 5 seconds without a need to configure a single setting. Which drastically lowers the barrier to entry for newcomers who have not yet tried TypeScript but would like to do so, because the standard way in Node world can sometimes be a little bit intimidating with huge number of options to choose from. Another thing that Deno is maybe not famous for, but we pride ourselves in, is web compatibility. But I will let Luca actually talk about that, since Luca did most of the work on this front.
Yeah, so Deno is server-side runtime for JavaScript. But really, if you use Deno, you don't really feel like you're using a server-side runtime often. And that is because we try to really behave a lot like a browser, because people are really familiar with browsers, right? Like browsers have all these great APIs, Fetch API, or Crypto API, WebSocket API, all these things that people are familiar with, that there's a huge amount of documentation, existing resources for, and existing libraries for. And we essentially allow you to tap into that knowledge by supporting all the same APIs on the server. So if you're a web developer, which has experience with like modern-ish JavaScript written for browsers, you're going to feel right at home in Deno through a web compat. And we take this very seriously. This is not just we like implement some web APIs and then call it a day, but when we think about how, like what the next APIs are that we're going to implement and what features are still missing from Deno, we'll take a look at if there's any web APIs that we can base those features on. And we work pretty closely with browser vendors to make sure that new web APIs work well for both server-side runtimes and browsers, not just one or the other.
Yeah, and another part about Deno is that it's an entire tool chain. So you get built-in formatter, linter, the ability to vendor your remote dependencies. What else is in there?
Yeah, it's your package manager. It is your editor integration as well. Like your editor is powered by Deno directly, which gives us all these really cool features. It has a built-in testing framework, which also integrates into your editor, into your CI pipelines, anywhere you want. Yeah, you can inspect your code, debug your code, generate coverage reports, all using the same executable without like having to download anything else. I was just thinking, is there anything else here? Any other tools?
I think that the integrated tool chain is probably my favorite thing about Deno. I get so frustrated when I use Node and I have to install these third-party modules, especially because npm is always just one maintainer getting angry away from having a malicious package on your hands. So having all these things integrated to me is just like great.
Yeah,
a lot of headache gone away.
Yeah, so somebody just mentioned in the comments that we have a compile feature as well, which we probably all forgot about. But yeah, you can compile your JavaScript right into a single executable binary, which is really cool. Actually, I just looked, and there's another feature we haven't covered, which is we have a documentation generator built in. So if you writing libraries, you can annotate your library functions or your types or interfaces with JS doc comments, and then use Deno doc or the Deno doc website at doc.denoland to like automatically generate documentation for those and have it like be nicely viewable in the browser, and make it really easy for your library's consumers to figure out how to use your library.
Yep, and there's also Deno install for say you want to take a script and make it into a command that you execute globally. You can just do Deno install, and then the name of the script, or name of the script, and then specify the alias you want to use. And now you can use that as a global command.
Yeah. Oh, and we said we can run TypeScript, right? We can't only just run TypeScript. We can also type check your TypeScript. So you don't even need to use TSC if you're using Deno. That's all built in as well. Deno can upgrade itself. Like if there's a new version of Deno available, you can just run Deno upgrade and it'll upgrade itself. So it's like
a version manager as well.
It's a version manager, yeah.
You can specify a Deno upgrade and then the version you want to go to. And
one more feature we haven't mentioned yet is that Deno by default is secure in a sense that by default, if you just run your script, your JavaScript or TypeScript code, it can't really do that much. That is, it cannot talk to the internet. It cannot read or write to your file system, sniff out your environmental variables, or spawn some sub-processes that could, run a crypto miner or something, unless you explicitly allow it to. And you can do that by specifying some CLI flags, which allows you to open up the system to the Deno program to your system. And you can do that in pretty granular way. So you don't have to say, okay, just access anything on my file system. You can actually scope it to certain directories. So for example, you can allow to only read and write to the current working directory and just spawn another Deno sub-processes, but nothing else. And this is something that was actually introduced by Deno first. I'm not sure I've heard about any other projects that had this ability before Deno came.
Yeah, and another part about that is if you just run a program without giving it any permissions, if the program tries to, the script tries to do something to access anything like the file system or the network, it'll prompt and say, do you want to give this access to that area? So you can kind of see what a script is using without having to know beforehand.
Yeah. And this is actually a feature that many people will already be familiar with from browsers again. Browsers have this feature too. Your website can't just read any file on your disk, right? It's very explicit about only being able to, or being sandboxed by default and allowing the user to opt into certain privileged features using prompts or things like that. So yeah, that's and JavaScript's a great language for that.
I feel like this is amazing, and I don't know how familiar certain people are who are watching, but for me, it just sounds like the new generation. I'm like, oh man, TypeScript out of the box, that's great, but can you use JavaScript? Is there a way to go back for those people who are not TypeScript lovers? And then just some of the ideas, and I think we're as an industry, moving more towards this idea that there's things that just do everything for you so you can be more productive. And you guys have definitely thought of really, really amazing ways to make development easy. For me personally, I started development during the explosion of the CLIs, and I have to tell you, if I did development before that, I'm not so sure I would have been so successful. There's a CLI for that. Oh, I can spin something up immediately. Okay, let me just start building stuff. And 1 week later, you're magically a senior software engineer. It's perfect. What else about Deno? Is there stuff that's coming soon that we should know about? Or the CLI specifically, sorry.
Yeah. So there's always things under development. I would say Some of the big features right now, we have a small team within our team. Unfortunately, none of them are on this call, but who are focusing on performance and trying to improve HTTP performance specifically. So there's some new work going on there. FFI, which stands for Foreign Function Interface, basically lets you talk to applications written in native code. There's been a lot of performance work there to try to make that as fast as possible. And just some ongoing work with our Node compat stuff, but I know we're supposed to talk about that later, and I keep bringing it up, so I'll pause on that. But yeah, those are like the big work streams in the CLI that I can think of. Does anyone else have any ideas there?
Yeah, I think in parallel we should also mention that in parallel we have another team within our team that is focusing on the developer experience, which spans more than just the CLI, but the CLI is part of it. So as Luca already mentioned, we have this automatic documentation generator, and our developer experience team has been working hard on improving capabilities of the system to make sure that the documentation we provide for all the built-in APIs is top-notch, while at the same time is actually completely programmatically generated, so we don't have to really maintain two separate sets of documentation. All of this is, say, self-documenting if you use proper JS doc syntax.
That is definitely magical. Nick also had some comments. So thank you, Nick, for being a supporter. Does Nick work with y'all?
No, I think
Lucas said yes,
works,
Colin said no.
fine.
Oh, cool. Hey, Nick. Okay. So I know this is the topic that Colin really wanted to get to, which is talking about Node.js compatibility. So maybe, Colin, you kind of want to kick us off and talk about just like, what is it? How does it work?
Yeah, I would say there's broadly two big areas of it. One is kind of API compatibility. So, running things like Node's HTTP server or Node's child process module and things like that. And then the second component is kind of like ecosystem or NPM compatibility. So, NPM has, what is it, like 1 million or 2 million packages on it. And people don't want to just walk away from all this. I don't want to say perfectly good code, because there's a lot of not perfectly good code on NPM, but all this existing code. And so, being able to start an Express server from inside of Deno, I think, is a big thing. And I'll let David talk about that a little bit more. But yeah, so the stuff that I've been working on right now is more or less the Node core API compatibility. So just within the past week, we've had, I think, 4 or 5 new APIs added to the child process module for better compatibility with Node. We actually run hundreds of the Node core test suite tests inside of our standard library to make sure that things are working exactly as they would in Node. And it's a big API surface to cover. I'm not making any claims that it's 100% perfect right now, but it's pretty good, and it's I would say consistently getting better. I guess, David, unless anyone else wants to talk about the Node core APIs, David, did you want to talk about NPM and specifiers for that?
Yeah, I want to touch on the Node core APIs real quick. I think for people who aren't super familiar with Deno yet, the reason we even need this is because Deno uses, like as we mentioned earlier, these like web APIs for most things. And the thing is that most of these, or a lot of these web APIs were invented after Node was initially conceived, which means that Node implements a whole different set of APIs to do certain operations, like reading things from the file system or doing network requests. So, and Deno by default implements only these modern APIs that are built on promises, that are built on like fetch, things like that. So this Node API compatibility layer is necessary to be able to run code which doesn't use this modern JavaScript. Instead uses more like older or just like less new JavaScript. Yeah, I don't want to say legacy because people always scream at me when I say legacy. But JavaScript, which is like not the most recent iteration of JavaScript. And to be able to run that code, there needs to be some sort of compatibility layer that translates your API calls from this older style API to a more modern underlying API, which is what the actual runtime implements.
Yeah, so the node compatibility layer is something that we've been working on for, I don't know, years now, but recently we've been going into, okay, how can we get like npm packages to work and run on Deno? So one thing that came around was esm.sh was one of the kind of like a transpile server where you take CommonJS code and then you transpile it into ESM, because Deno only supports ESM modules and not CommonJS. And
Like
so,
browsers.
yeah, like just like browsers. And so we can't run CommonJS code in Deno. So recently, what we've been doing is we basically have introduced, it's unstable right now, but this concept of npm specifiers where you write an import statement and you do import whatever from, and then in the module specifier, you say npm colon, and then the package name, and then you do at, and then you can do the version requirement that you want to import. And that kind of, the idea behind that is you get kind of a portal into the npm ecosystem and into those packages that you can now use in your Deno code. And we released that in version, I forget what was, Bartik, do you remember which version that was? 24?
125, I
Oh,
believe.
125. Yeah, and so now we're just incrementally improving that, fixing lots of bugs, and so in that area, that actually runs, like, downloads the npm packages and runs them from a global cache, and that CommonJS is supported in there. We run the CommonJS as is. We don't do any transforms on that code, and um, yeah, so
The great thing with this approach is that it's not so different to what browsers do. Of course, browsers cannot load node modules. They don't know how to do that. However, this npm colon specifier is similar enough for browsers to the browser style imports that you don't need a separate installation step. That is, you don't need to npm install your packages up front, because Deno can already download and cache indefinitely all of the import statements that it discovers. So if you put a remote specifier there, like HTTPS, esm.sh something, or now npm colon chalk, Deno can automatically discover them, pull them for you, and cache them indefinitely, which feels kind of magical at first, because it's just such a different paradigm to what you are used to. So again, you don't need to install these dependencies up front. When Deno encounters them and sees that, oh, I haven't seen this yet, okay, I'm gonna go and pull it and cache it for you. So you wait a little bit the first time, and then it's just instantaneous, because you don't need to remove your node modules directory in your project every other week or something. So, and additionally, the way Deno handles this is that you have a single copy of the package downloaded. So you don't get this black hole node modules problem where you got a bunch of directories, each of them in gigabytes in size. Instead, you have one global cache that is much smaller, because you don't need to download the same package over and over again in each of your projects.
yeah, and a huge advantage of this is, like, it doesn't create a node modules directory by default, and you don't need package JSON by default. So say you're writing some script that you want to use, you just import whatever npm package you want, and then you can run that script, and your directory will just have that script in it. It doesn't have to have a package JSON. It won't create a node modules, and the kind of npm install happens in the background. And we do have some compatibility features that we've implemented most recently in the latest version, which there are certain environments and packages that expect a node modules folder to exist. And so that's something that can be opted into. You can specify a flag. Right now it's called the node modules dir, and that will create a node modules directory for you, very similar to how pnpm works using symlinks. So yeah, it's very convenient for that.
So another nice feature, I think, is the fact that Deno uses import maps. So say you wanted to use an npm package, like a utility package like Lodash. There's a good chance if you have a big enough application, you're going to be requiring Lodash or importing Lodash all over the place. If you had to do, npm : Lodash and supply the version all over the place, it'd be kind of a maintenance headache. But you can actually specify an import map where you could specify, npm and the version that you want, and that way you're, guaranteed to just have to import Lodash all over your application because Deno's smart enough to map that to the resource on npm.
And by extension, a great thing with import maps is that, again, it's a web standard. So you can have an import map for your local development, and then if you want to deploy or ship the code you're working on to the browser, you can write or generate another import map that will not use npm, but instead will use one of the CDNs. And that's the only file you will need to change. And then again, it will just work in the browsers because browsers support import maps. So many people feel like import maps are similar to package.json, where you can specify your dependencies, but seems half-baked. But on the other hand, it is supported by browsers, and browsers have, everyone uses a browser, right? Everyone who uses internet probably uses a web browser, and that gives you a huge opportunity to share the same technology, so you don't have to use completely two different approaches depending if you're on the server or in the browser environment.
Yeah, so the status of this feature is, again, it's very new, still unstable, and it doesn't work right now with TypeScript or in the editor. So we have our Deno language server, and it's not supported in there. So this is, again, yeah, just very experimental, and but we're hoping to stabilize this soon once we get
When?
all that.
You sold me. Do you guys have like a?
We don't have a hard
roadmap somewhere. It's
Yeah,
the
we don't have a
worst. You
hard
can never
deadline.
actually put a date because then, But are you thinking like, sometime this year maybe, or is it going to take like another year?
Hopefully this year, but we're still going to have a lot of discussions internally in the team about it.
Yeah. So people are like currently using it. It's just like, oh God, are you recommending not in production or?
I wouldn't use it in production yet. It's fun to try out and see how it's going to work, and give suggestions about it if you have any. But
I mean, I'm already sold, so you should have caveated with that. Well, it's not stable yet, but let's talk about why it's going to be so amazing.
It's working pretty well now, though.
Yeah,
there's been a lot of bug
amazing.
fixes we've got in, and the compatibility layer is just getting better and better.
Yeah, and obviously your documentation is fantastic, right?
Well, a lot of the documentation, Luca keeps saying like a browser. A lot of documentation you can just look up what browsers do.
Yeah, it's either you go to MDN, look up what browsers do, or if it's like Node compat things, then you go to the Node docs, look up what Node does.
Yeah,
that's like
just
docs.
on.
So it's great. We have other people write our docs for us. It's a really innovative approach to API design, I think.
It's an elaborate ruse to avoid writing docs.
Yes.
But yeah, just on on documentation. So we're right now we have our Deno manual. I think it's at deno.land/manual, and that's the whole CLI, like how it works, what the APIs are, and that's right now undergoing an extensive rewrite because that's evolved over several years of many different writers, and now we're going through and basically just making sure that that everything flows well in it, and that should be a really good rewrite. But yeah, we have that whole one team that's just focusing on documentation and user experience, or in DX right now.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of things y'all have talked about just have, the fact that you're focused on developer experience, the fact that you're focused on, kind of like modernizing where things are going. Do you see boot camps and different, if you take React, for example, right? Like, I feel like the reason why React has kind of just taken off and become the standard in many ways is kind of starting from the boot camps and everybody teaching that in the boot camps. Have you started to see people teaching JavaScript kind of move towards using Deno because of the developer experience and just kind of how easy everything kind of is out of the box?
Possibly. I don't actually know. I'm not really super involved with like a lot of people that are just starting their JavaScript career, unfortunately. So I don't really know, but I think from what I know about Deno, I think it would be a pretty great place to start with if you're just starting out with JavaScript or even starting out with TypeScript. Just installing Deno, it's a single command to install Deno. It's really very, very easy. And you can like have so much tooling at your fingertips with just that single install. I think it's a great place to start.
We have been seeing some people using deploy, which we'll get to, who are new users. So.
And then what about just what do you feel like is well, it sounds like a negative question, but it's really not. But I guess what's preventing people from moving over to Deno? What's preventing Deno from becoming the standard? Or is there nothing?
Well, like the big feedback we've been hearing is just NPM compatibility. So a lot of people, they haven't wanted to switch over, and they switch over, but then they find out, oh, I need this one package that I was using before, or it's like really hard to rewrite that, or it's just some missing functionality that they need. So we feel that these kind of NPM specifiers will really fill that gap, and just give people more confidence in switching over to Deno that their NPM packages are going to work, and that the functionality will be there for them.
I think one like really important thing to know about Deno is that the way we approach our like ecosystem and the development of Deno is not that we approach like individual features and say like this seems like a cool feature, let's implement it, but rather we try to think about like how each feature we add integrates with like the entire like I guess you could call it a pipeline of building a project, right? Like how easy is it to get started with this? How easy is it to find information about this? How easy is it to continue using once you've already started using it? Like how do I deploy this into production easily? Like we try to really make sure that when we add a feature, it really works end to end. Like when we stabilize a feature, we want that feature to work end to end across the entire ecosystem, across the entire platform. So that's also why some things like these NPM specifiers, they're not supported across the entire across our entire stack yet, right? Like David had mentioned that they're not supported in the editor integration as of right now, and they're not supported in type checking right now, for example. So these are kinds of things that we try to resolve before stabilizing, because we really want any feature that is available in Deno to work consistently across our entire system. Yeah.
Well, to change an industry takes a long time. I guess it can't happen overnight, but it'd be nice. Any other like comments you all want to make about like this topic before we kind of move into Deno deploy?
Yeah, so another thing that we have is we have a lot of like people who have developed modules for Deno that they distribute to other Deno users. And we've created a tool recently called DNT, which allows them, it stands for Deno to Node transform. And what that does is it basically takes your Deno code that you've written and it builds it for Node and distributes it as an NPM package. And so what that allows library authors to do is to just use the Deno toolchain and use Deno for everything, but then still be able to take that code and ship it on NPM for Node users. So that's at github.com/denoland/deno/DNT. So yeah, that's kind of the flip side of that coin.
Yeah, and I'll go ahead and post that link in the chat so everybody can check that out as well. Okay. So let's move on to Deno deploy. I know, David, I think you mentioned that you were kind of excited about this. That you said your beginners were, or you've been seeing some beginners use it, right? But maybe let's just talk about, what is it? How is it different from Deno CLI first? And then kind of go into details.
Yeah, so Deno deploy is our hosted offering for Deno. It essentially allows you to take your Deno code that you've written using the Deno CLI and deploy it to our network of servers all across the world. So that's the core idea. The core idea is you write your code locally with Deno CLI, and then you can push it to Deno deploy, and we'll figure out how to run it in production across the entire world, and make sure it gets run really close to users. You don't pay for it unless people are actually making requests to your service. It like integrates with GitHub, so you can just create a project on Deno deploy, link it to your GitHub repository, and then every time you push some code to GitHub, it'll automatically deploy to all of our servers across the world. And yeah, like the idea is that it's meant to be really, really easy to go from local development to like production ready, essentially. It's the Vercel or the Netlify for backend. Like if you used Netlify, for example, before, you know how easy it is to like create a project and put it into a GitHub repository, link it to Netlify, and it'll like deploy automatically on every push. And we sort of give you that same experience with Deno deploy when you're writing like web servers for Deno.
So, some cool features, I think. There's a dashboard for it, so nice UI to make everything manageable, and that by default will include some metrics about your project. So showing you your deployments, showing you CPU utilization and network utilization, things like that. You can set up custom domains, so you can provision certificates, and instead of having like a deno.dev URL for your project, you can actually put it on like the this dot domain if you wanted to, Tracy. And then I guess implementation wise, it's actually a more locked down version of the CLI. So the CLI is built on all of these open source Rust crates. And then Deno deploy then takes those same Rust crates, reassembles them in the same way that like the CLI would, but with some, like I said, some additional restrictions. So, for example, you can't currently write to the file system, but you can read from it and things of that nature.
Yeah. And all these restrictions are in place to be able to scale up your deployments like all over the world, have them run hundreds of times across the world in different locations on different servers. So we can like guarantee that users will get fast responses no matter where they are and no matter how many requests your site is getting.
I feel like we haven't mentioned this yet, but one of great advantages of deploy is thanks to how it's built, following similar standards to the CLI, and that is using ES modules that are specified via import statements. It allows us to get all of your code really, really quickly and deploy it all over the globe, so globally, essentially in seconds. So some of the folks that seen it in action were not really believing that it's that fast, like the YouTube video was sped up or something, but it wasn't. It's really that fast. And it's a huge shift to existing solutions where, you know, you need to get a Docker container, build it, and then it takes a long time because these containers are super heavy. And in here, it sometimes feels instantaneous, and you just can't believe, and you need to like refresh 3 times to make sure that we're not trying to, you know, fake what we're doing, but we're not. It's really that fast.
Yeah, like the biggest limiting factor to our deploy times is not like CPU processing time or anything. It's like how fast can we how fast can we actually talk to a server on the other side of the world to tell it that there's an update? You know, like that's the kind of like level of speed we're operating at.
And
like
in such case,
most deployments in under 5 seconds.
Yeah, and in such case, what Luca just said, like the speed of light is becoming a limiting factor because it just takes like 150 milliseconds for the round trip around the world for the data to arrive there. And yeah, that's
like in perfect network conditions, and you never have perfect network conditions. So it's more like half a second probably for a round trip.
I feel like you're making people care about the edge. You know, sometimes I'm like, ooh, what is all this edge talk? And, you know, you hear about it and you hear about people kind of trying to promote it. But a lot of times it's hard to kind of, I don't know, it's not as tangible. But I feel like in this conversation, like, you know, why the edge matters and how you all are using it and maximizing the value of it is like actually relevant to a lot of us developers. So that's amazing.
Yeah, like I was actually just giving a talk the other day, and I looked up some statistics from around the world, like how fast do major population centers, like how long does it take for them to get a response from one of our servers across the world? And what I found was that like essentially all network or like all internet users in the developed world will get a response from one of our servers in under 100 milliseconds. And it does not matter where you are in the developed world, anywhere. You will get a response from one of our servers in less than 100 milliseconds. And that's really very, very powerful, especially if you're doing something like e-commerce, where loading times can have like a significant impact on conversions. It's really, really critical to be able to like quickly get data from your servers to your users.
Any other comments on Deno deploy or things y'all might want to share?
I think our next topic, Fresh, is like gonna tie us right back into deploy in just a second. So
yes, Fresh framework. Okay, very exciting. Who wants to introduce it?
I guess I'm probably best to introduce it. Yeah, so Fresh is a new web. For those who are not aware, I originally built Fresh, so that's why it's probably my best to introduce it. So Fresh is a new web framework that we built for Deno that makes use of all of the Deno like toolchain and ecosystem, and really is meant to feel like an extension of Deno rather than like a really standalone framework. And it integrates really nicely with all of our existing tooling. So Fresh is a framework that feels very familiar to people that have used Next.js or Remix before. It uses JSX for templating, just like JSX or just like Next.js and Remix. But there's some big differences, namely that Fresh is really built to be server-side rendered on the edge, rather than being server-side rendered in a few locations, or even being pre-generated, like having pre-generated HTML that like you would often have on Netlify, for example. We really encourage that you do dynamic server-side rendering for each of your requests, because this can give even better user experiences than other solutions can. And when you deploy your like Fresh onto a global edge network where you have less than 100 milliseconds response time anywhere, this isn't slower than it's often even faster than like pre-built HTML on a CDN. Yeah, so some of the standard features of Fresh are that we don't ship any JavaScript to the client by default, which makes it really, really fast. We do the server-side rendering, we generate HTML on the server, we send that to the client, and then we hydrate like little pieces of your page that actually require JavaScript on the client. But we don't like hydrate the entire page. Next.js, for example, if you use the server-side rendering features of Next.js, what it'll do is it'll perform a server-side render, ship that HTML to the client, and then it'll ship all of the JavaScript that is necessary to render that page to the client again, and have the client re-render that page, which is a great way to drain your user's battery, and is like not something you really want to be doing. You really don't want to be duplicating this work. Right? Like if you think of a blog, for example, it's one of my favorite examples. A blog where you have to render some markdown into HTML to display to your users. If you do this in something like Next.js, what will often happen is you'll do all this work on the server, and then you ship like the finished rendered blog to the client as HTML. And then on the client, you have to download the markdown parser, markdown renderer, the raw markdown, like all of the other things you need to glue all that together again, to do all the same work that the server just did to produce identical HTML to what the server just did. So like the user did not notice this actually happened, except for that their device was feeling slow for a couple of seconds while everything was downloading. So we try to avoid all that. We try to like put you on a really fast path by default. Yeah, so server-side render and then hydrate little islands.
Yeah, that's really amazing. And I do love a good new web framework. And for those of you all who are into bright, shiny things, look how beautiful this website is. So fresh.deno.dev definitely makes me excited about it. So love to hear about those who check it out. But yeah, no, this is really exciting. I've already posted it and I'm like, okay, all right, who's using it? Let's go.
So
Go ahead, Colin.
I was just going to say we're definitely using it internally. We have a lot of open source web properties on our GitHub account that you can actually go and see examples of Fresh in action. One of them that I actually had a hand in building is our e-commerce site. So you can actually buy real Deno merch at merch.deno.com. And so it's backed by Shopify, but the UI is all built with Fresh. And like I said, it's a real e-commerce site. Like people are actually getting shirts and stickers and things all around the world. We have some other showcase apps on the GitHub as well, like chat clients, blogs, things of that nature. So definitely worth, I think, perusing the Deno GitHub for open source examples.
Yeah, and like the Deno.land website also uses Fresh. It's probably one of the biggest users of Fresh right now. Our company website, Deno.com, also is built using Fresh. The Fresh website itself is built using Fresh, the one you just showed with nice animations. Yeah.
Yeah, somewhat maybe unrelated note, but I think Fresh is like a pinnacle that shows our holistic approach to the whole development cycle. So we started talking about Deno CLI, how we try to make it have the best DX in class, and then about Deno deploy, which allows you to ship your code close to your users, and then you have Fresh, which combines the two and just shows you how powerful both sides of the equation are. And it actually, the way we do things is actually dog fooding most of this stuff. So as Colin just described, we use Fresh for a lot of our web properties. Obviously, they run on deploy. And now when we look for the next things, features to ship, we try to think what will help what we already have and make it grow. So as an example, Fresh is already super fast, but it can be faster because the fastest way to deliver something to your users is to not do any work. So we're looking into caching APIs, and not just some caching APIs, but we're trying to actually back them with web standardized cache API. So yeah, hold tight, stand by, and expect some exciting news in the coming days that will improve the whole ecosystem.
Very exciting. Coming days, you heard it here. Bartek made a promise. No, I'm just teasing. Well, no, that's really amazing. I mean,
No, he did definitely make a promise. I feel like we have to hold him to this now. Bartek, if it doesn't land by release, then you're going to be personally to blame.
Yeah, but now I'm personally very excited about checking out Fresh and sharing that. And I think your approach is definitely really exciting. And I just love seeing all these new little frameworks popping up here and there. But I think like the way you all are doing it with Fresh and having a more holistic approach and kind of taking into consideration all these things and having it work within the Deno ecosystem is definitely amazing. So I'm very excited about that. And, Luca, we will have you on the Modern Web podcast to talk about that soon too. So that'll be amazing. Yeah. Well, any other kind of questions or comment, or not questions or comments, but any other like comments that we want to talk about to kind of wrap up this State of Deno?
I just wanted to throw out a couple of announcements. So
yes.
the next summer minor release of the CLI is due out this week. I think next week I'll be speaking about Deno at Node.js. I think Luca, you have a talk next week too, right?
Yeah, at a Node.js in Serbia. I think all the tickets are gone now, so I can't ask you to book them, but. And then in a couple of weeks, I'll be giving another talk at React Advanced London about Fresh.
Cool.
I look forward to that.
And you'll be able to hear about Vite and Deno in a talk that I'll do in upcoming ViteConf in 2 weeks, I think. So
nice.
All you front-end folks who really wanted to use all your favorite frameworks with Deno, yeah, this is something to look for. I feel it will be exciting.
Yes, I'm hosting a panel at ViteConf, so it'll be exciting to see you there again, virtually, I suppose. Cool. Well, all of these folks are also really amazing. They're all on Twitter. So all their Twitter handles are here on the screen. So feel free to bug them, especially Bartek, in a few days. Like if you don't, there were promises
you don't
made.
See new caching APIs. If there's any other features, actually, generally, if there's any other features that you think are missing from Deno, make sure to personally ping Bartek on Twitter, and we'll get to them soon.
Bartek, you just have to make sure those notifications on your phone are on. So like 3 a.m., you're responding. No, this is really amazing.
Yeah. Oh, I hadn't mentioned this. Bartek is in the Australia time zone as well. So if you want to talk to him live, make sure to always do it in the Australia time zone. Yeah.
Well, it is like 1 a.m. for you right now, isn't it?
No, I'm in Europe.
Okay, I was gonna say, like, you don't sound Australian, but that's fine, whatever. But yes, I get it, Luca. Sorry, it took me a second. It would be great, yes. Okay. Yeah. So, anyways, again, thank you so much, everyone, for joining today. And we will be doing some follow-ups on the Modern Web podcast too. Of course, you can see a bunch of these folks at the different conferences you're going to. So, feel free to do that. And, I look forward to trying out all these new features and being mad because of the compatibility issues that, will be all
Maybe we
fixed by
could
you,
answer
Colin,
one
in the
last
next
question.
month. Yes, of course.
Because I feel it comes up quite often, and I think we should clear up this confusion.
What is the question?
So, question from the chat. Can we get it on the screen?
Okay, this last one.
Yes. So,
okay.
I wouldn't say it's our mission to rebuild everything from the ground up, but rather show that some things could be done in some other way, more aligned to the standards. Would you agree with me, or maybe you have some different opinions? But it feels to come up quite a lot, since at first when Deno came out, it had this hard stance that it's not compatible with NPM, and now people feel that we're like, we're training our ideals for more community. But I don't think that really gives the whole picture of what we're trying to do.
Yeah, I think if you specifically look at the question, question is it our mission to rebuild everything from the ground up? I think if you compare Deno to Node, for example, especially in the early days, we built a lot less things from the ground up than Node did. Node had to invent a whole bunch of APIs. We didn't. We took our API design largely from browsers. I think it's maybe not so much that we want to rebuild everything, but I think we want to have a holistic approach to the ecosystem, where we consider all facets of it at the same time, and we don't say no, this is out of scope, and because it's out of scope, somebody else has to deal with it, and we're not going to care about it at all. That's not how we operate. We try to really take into account all the different use cases right from the get-go, so we don't get into a state where we have a feature that works really well for this one very specific use case, but doesn't work well for anyone else or the rest of the ecosystem.
Well, thank you so much for clearing that up. And again, these folks are all on Twitter, so feel free to ask more questions there. And we appreciate everyone joining. So thanks for listening in, and we'll see you next time.
Hi, everyone.
Thank you.
And thanks for hosting, Tracy.